Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, the bitter taste of disappointment. I'm going to talk about my 10 worst reads of 2023. Okay, so two things to say right at the start. So firstly, these aren't necessarily the 10 worst books I read in 2023, but they are the 10 books that disappointed me the most. So books that I went into with a degree of expectation, either because of the author or because I'd heard other people praise the books. And then when I read the book, I found they just weren't for me. And the second thing is linked to that final point of the books not being for me. So I will talk about books here that many people out there may love, and indeed there's a few books here that I know many people love. So me saying I didn't enjoy them is in no way meant to mean that other people shouldn't enjoy them. Everyone takes different things from the books that they read, and certainly many of the books that I read and enjoy are books that other people think are terrible. So yes, with that caveat, let's go into my worst 10 books of 2023. I'm not doing these in like a ranked order. It was too difficult to do that. I'm just going to do them in the order that I read them. So the first one then is one of the first books I read in the year, and that is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. So I had a reasonable degree of expectation for this one because it was a Goodreads Choice Award winner. It won the best horror novel in, I think, 2021 or 22. I just thought it was a terrible book. So, and the other reason I guess it was disappointing is it wasn't terrible all the way through. So the first half was actually quite good. So it's about a young woman who goes to stay with this family to look after their kid. There's definitely something weird and creepy going on. The kid has this imaginary friend who he draws pictures of, and the pictures you see in the book, and they get increasingly weird and disturbing. But the resolution at the end of this book was just played into so many horrible, objectionable kind of psychological theories and things like that, and just didn't work for me at all. So whilst I found the book reasonably readable for a large portion of it, by the end I just wanted to chuck it out the window, to be honest with you. Right, so that's the first one out of the way. So the second one then is 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Agustina Bazterrica. So I went into this with high expectations because I really, really liked Tender as the Flesh by Bazterrica, which I read, I think I read last year. I think I read the year before. I think I read that in 2022. I thought that was a really good book. 19 Claws and Blackbird is a collection of short stories. Came out, I think, originally before, so in Spanish came out before Tender as the Flesh, and feels like the publishers wanted to get another book by Agustina Bazterrica out into the English-speaking market, and so had picked this one from her back catalogue. And I just didn't think it was very good. There were a couple of stories which I quite enjoyed, but the majority of the stories I thought, A, weren't terribly well done, but also felt too much like they were trying to make a point. And the actual, the pleasure of the storytelling got lost because of that. And I'm someone who very much goes into books for the story. If they have a message and that message is well conveyed and conveyed without getting in the way of the story and the characters and things like that, then I'm all for that. But if the message overwhelms the story, then books often fall flat for me, and that was definitely the case with 19 Claws and a Blackbird. Next up then, a very different book, definitely not a book that has a message, that is Garth Marenghi's Terrortome. So I was really looking forward to reading this. So Garth Marenghi, if you don't know, is a fictional author who came to fame in the 90s. Is it 90s or early 2000s in the UK, in a very brief TV show. So there was a TV show that just ran for one season called Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. And the concept is that Garth Marenghi is this hack author, someone like Sean Hudson or someone like that, who I adore. I love Sean Hudson's books. But a kind of cheesy horror author who has got a budget from a TV station to make a TV series. And the TV series is just really over the top, really, really funny, beautifully acted by a really good cast, and it just works brilliantly. So Terrortome then is a collection of 3 novellas supposedly written by Garth Merenghi in that similar kind of overblown, ridiculous style. But for me, without the cast making the jokes work, and they do that so brilliantly in Dark Place, without the cast making the jokes work, it just didn't work, and it felt like a bit of a slog, to be honest with you. The stories were, okay, but they weren't good enough to pull me as a reader through. And there were some genuinely funny moments, but I didn't think that the joke sustained itself through the duration of the book. I know there are some people out there who really, really love this book, but I was definitely not a fan. I was definitely disappointed by it. Next up, then, a book I wasn't necessarily expecting to love, but I was expecting to like more than I did, because I had seen other people who quite enjoyed it, and that was Woom by Duncan Ralston. So an extreme horror book about a room in a hotel, and a guy who has taken a sex worker there, and is doing increasingly weird things with her whilst telling her stories about other things that have happened in that same room, and it just felt increasingly ridiculous as it went on, and not even in a fun way, in a slightly icky way. So yeah, I won't tell you, I won't go into details, because A, it's a bit icky, and B, it will spoil the book for you should you choose to read it. But yeah, I really did not enjoy Woom at all. Next up, then, some more horror, and one that really, really fell flat for me, which surprised and disappointed me. So it was The Devil's Laughter by William W. Johnstone, which was our group read for Garth August in 2023. So it was a book that Pax Panic had read the previous year and had enjoyed. And I've read one other book by Johnstone, which was Bat, which was awful, but I really liked. So Johnstone is a writer, definitely on the conservative end of the political spectrum, who wrote a mixture of kind of westerns and men's adventure type books, and also wrote horror stories. And The Devil's Laughter is one of those horror novels. So it's about a group of Satanists and a men's adventure type guy who's going up against them. But it just didn't work for me. There was a level of fun in Bats, because it was so over the top and ridiculous, that made me really, really enjoy it. But for whatever reason, in The Devil's Laughter, that magic fun element was missing, and I just found the book ludicrous and a bit unpleasant. In particular, there's a twist at the end which is quite nasty, and definitely spoiled what enjoyment I had got out of the book up to that point. Moving on, then, another book I read for Garth August. This one was The Stud by Jackie Collins. So I've read one other Jackie Collins book, Hollywood Wives, which I thought was phenomenal. I loved Hollywood Wives. It was so over the top. It was so weirdly graphic, and disgusting at times. Like the amount of sex in Hollywood Wives is just off the charts, and it's not just the volume, it's the variety. And there's some very weird and dodgy stuff that goes on in Hollywood Wives, and it's a blast to read as a result. The Stud, I think, was Jackie Collins' first novel, and it shows. So it's about a nightclub in London, and a variety of different people who have a connection to that nightclub in some way, and it just the characters I found boring. The sex was boring, and sex, unless it's quite crazy or unless you're really invested in the characters, I think tends to be quite a boring thing to read about. So yeah, the sex wasn't interesting, the characters weren't interesting, they were all just horrible people being horrible to each other, basically. So yeah, The Stud I did not enjoy. Next up, then, a book again that I read for Garth August, and one that a few other people have read and really, really liked, and I was expecting to enjoy it, but I just found it a bit hard work. That was Lupe by Jean Thomson. So the concept for this book is fantastic, which is basically there's a murder, it's very mysterious, and this woman gets accused of the murder and is put on a witch trial as a result. So there's definitely something supernatural that's gone on. They identify that this woman they believe this woman was the murderer, and they put her on trial. So it's a witch trial in the modern age, which is a really fun concept. I do quite enjoy courtroom dramas, and there's an element of courtroom drama in here. I also enjoy weird occult kind of fiction. It's got, as you can see from the cover there, it's got a bit of spontaneous combustion, which is always fun. But for some reason, the way it just hung together, I just found myself less and less engaged with the book as it went on, and therefore was really not a fan, which is a shame because, as I say, I was really looking forward to that one. Okay, 3 more things to go then. So next, a book, the first book in the series, a beloved series. Many people really, really like this series. When I posted my wrap up where I said I didn't enjoy this book, a lot of people said, oh well, yeah, the first couple of books in the series aren't very good. You have to give it a bit of time. But I've got too many books I want to read to give, to read another book that's not very good, having enjoyed the first book, or having read the first book, which wasn't very good, just to get to the ones that are better. But as I say, loads of people love this series, so no disrespect meant to them. Anyway, the series is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. The book was Stormfront, so a book about a wizard in a kind of weird hybrid kind of world which is largely like our world but has magical creatures and things like that. Harry Dresden is a wizard and a detective, so it's got that kind of hardboiled detective kind of style to it, but also loads of magic stuff. I'm not a big fan of magic stuff. I like hardboiled detectives. I don't really like magic stuff. So maybe I should have known I wasn't going to enjoy it going into it. But yeah, I just found it quite juvenile. It felt like, not even really like a YA book. It felt like a middle grade book, to be honest with you. I just thought it was very, very silly and not particularly enjoyable as a result. So yes, unfortunately, a miss for me. Next then, we have a 2023 release, one that we read as a group read in my Patreon, and the majority of people, I would say, in that group read really enjoyed it. So don't necessarily take my opinion on it, but for me it just didn't particularly work. That was Maeve Fly by CJ Leede. So I'd had seen some mixed reviews of this going into it. I'd seen some people really, really rave about it, and other people say it didn't really work for them. And I definitely fall into the latter camp. So a book about a young woman in LA who works as effectively a Disney princess, but is also basically a serial killer. So there is a lot of graphic violence in this book, which was fun at times, but also it just gets bogged down in like references to other things, which I just felt got in the way of the story. And it felt too often like CJ Leede was kind of being a bit of a show off and trying to tell you as a reader all the smart stuff, all the smart books she's read, and it just felt pointless. I just wanted the story. I didn't want all these references to other books and things like that. I didn't feel like they added anything to the book. So there were elements of it that were fun, but overall, I'm afraid I didn't particularly enjoy it. And then finally, a reread, and a reread by one of my favourite authors. So either I should have enjoyed this or I should have known I wasn't going to enjoy it, given that it was a reread. But I went into it with reasonably high expectations, definitely interested to see what the book was like anyway. So a book I first read, I think when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, and didn't have particularly much memory of. Anyway, the book is Rage by Stephen King from the Bachman books, a book about a high school shooting where the main character is that shooter and is kind of something of an anti-hero in the book. He holds the rest of his class hostage, and over the course of the book, the class come to respect him for what he had done in terms of shooting people, basically, which felt like quite a bad message. Not particularly elegantly handled in the book. It felt like a clumsily written book with a dislikable central character who you were supposed to be rooting for to an extent, which in itself felt wrong. King wrote it as a teenager. King has subsequently removed it from print because there were actual high school shootings that were where there were links to this book, where the shooter had read this book. So King, I think, has a similar opinion of it to me, to be fair. But yeah, I really didn't enjoy it, and it's rare for me not to have at least some fun with a Stephen King book. I really didn't have any fun at all with that one. So yes, those are my 10 most disappointing books of 2023. Overall, I had a fantastic reading year. And I would say that, the vast majority of those 10 books I enjoyed in some way, even if they did disappoint me a bit. But yeah, I hope you all had fantastic reading years in 2023 too. Do let me know if you had any duffs in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.